During the Great Depression, working-class families turned desperation into innovation, creating meals that would feed their children when money ran out but hunger didn't. If you recognize these 25 foods, you understand what it means to make something from nothing. Wait until you see number 17, it'll take you straight back to Sunday mornings at Grandma's house. 1. Milk toast, morning comfort in a bowl. When breakfast needed to happen but the cupboards were nearly bare, milk toast became the gentle start to countless Depression-era mornings. Picture warm milk poured over toasted bread, often with just a sprinkle of sugar and cinnamon, when families could spare it. This wasn't just food, it was comfort in edible form. The bread would soften in the warm milk, creating something that felt substantial enough to fuel a child through morning chores or a long school day. Milk toast was served plain, or with milk and syrup when no milk was available. Coffee was used. At just pennies per serving, it provided calcium and carbohydrates that growing bodies needed. Food writer Memf Fisher perfectly captured its essence, calling it a source of reassurance and moral and physical strength. For working-class families, this simple combination transformed stale bread and precious milk into something that felt almost luxurious. The warmth alone was a blessing during cold mornings when coal or wood for heating was carefully rationed. What makes milk toast special isn't its complexity, but its ability to make children feel cared for even when times were impossibly hard. That bowl of creamy comfort reminded kids that even in the darkest days, someone was looking out for them. 2. Fried Bolognia Sandwiches, the working man's steak. When real steak was a distant memory, fried bologna became the closest thing to hot meat that most working-class families could afford. The sizzle in the pan created anticipation, and that first bite delivered protein that stretched tight budgets just a little further. Bolognia sandwiches were a regional specialty in western Pennsylvania and other Appalachian regions, and when you were trying to stretch a dime during the Depression, bologna was often the only meat on hand. Smart mothers would score the edges before frying to prevent the bologna from curling, creating perfect flat circles that fit bread slices. The beauty was in the transformation. Cold, somewhat bland lunch meat became something warm and substantial. Some families would fry an egg alongside it when eggs were available, creating what felt like a feast. With pork chops, roast chicken, and steak being too expensive, you could have hot meat for dinner if you fried bologna. For children who might go to school with just a cold bologna sandwich, coming home to a fried bologna dinner felt special. The crispy edges and warm center provided comfort that went beyond nutrition, proving that even the simplest ingredients could create memorable meals when prepared with love. 3. Sugar sandwiches, sweetness when nothing else would do. Sometimes the only treat a working-class child knew was a slice of bread spread with butter and sprinkled generously with white sugar. These weren't desserts in any traditional sense, but moments of pure sweetness in lives that often had precious little. During the Depression WWII, foods like sugar, coffee, butter, or meat were rationed, and Americans could only receive certain amounts of each food. When a family had used their sugar ration for coffee or essential baking, saving even a teaspoon for a child's sugar sandwich was an act of love. The ritual was simple but meaningful, carefully spreading whatever fat was available, then the precious shower of granulated sugar that caught the light like tiny crystals. Each bite delivered instant energy and the psychological boost that comes from anything sweet. For children who might not taste candy for months at a time, this homemade sweetness was pure magic. What's remarkable is how these sugar sandwiches created lasting memories. Adults who grew up with them often recall the exact texture, how the sugar would crunch initially, then dissolve on the tongue, mixing with the bread to create something that felt like a proper treat, even when it cost almost nothing. 4. Cornbread in milk, the Depression cereal. Long before fancy breakfast cereals lined grocery store shelves, working-class children often started their day with crumbled cornbread floating in whatever milk the family could spare. This wasn't a planned recipe, it was pure practical wisdom, born from necessity. Cornbread in milk was eaten as the cornbread with the milk drunk separately. Leftover cornbread from dinner would be broken into chunks and placed in bowls, then covered with milk that had been warmed on the stove. Sometimes families would add a precious sprinkle of sugar, but often the natural sweetness of cornmeal was enough. This combination provided substantial nutrition. Cornmeal offered carbohydrates and some protein, while milk added calcium and fat that growing children desperately needed. The corn provided a heartiness that regular bread couldn't match, helping children feel full longer during active days. The preparation became a morning ritual that many Depression-era children never forgot. The yellow cornbread chunks bobbing in white milk created visual appeal, and the combination of textures, soft bread, smooth milk, made breakfast feel more substantial than it actually was. This simple meal proved that creativity and necessity could transform leftovers into something genuinely satisfying. 5. Water pea, when even eggs were precious. Imagine creating a pie that tastes rich and custardy without using a single egg. Water pie, as its name suggested, referred to a peculiar pie made up almost entirely of water. After adding sugar, flour, butter, and some vanilla, the result was an amazing pie with a custard-like texture. This wasn't just making do, this was kitchen chemistry that would impress modern food scientists. As the pie heated up, the melted sugar, emulsified butter, and leached starch formed the most unexpected binding agent. Working-class bakers discovered that heat and time could transform the humblest ingredients into something that genuinely resembled traditional custard pie. The process required patience and faith. Mixing water, sugar, flour, and butter created what looked like thin, unpromising batter. But in the oven's heat, magic happened. The flour thickened, the butter enriched, and the sugar sweetened, creating a filling that set properly and tasted surprisingly satisfying. For families where eggs were saved for special occasions or sold for desperately needed cash, water pie offered the psychological comfort of dessert. Children didn't need to know the science. They just knew that somehow their mothers had created pie from nearly nothing, proving that love could indeed work miracles in the kitchen. 6. Poor man's meal: potatoes, hot dogs, and hope. When you had exactly 3 ingredients and needed to feed a family, the poor man's meal became a Depression-era staple that filled stomachs and stretched dollars further than seemed possible. The purpose of this meal was to be extremely cheap and filling, which is what people needed to survive in the 1930s. Ever since they were first introduced, hot dogs have been associated with the working class as an affordable dinner option. However, it was during the Great Depression that they truly made their mark. Sliced hot dogs, fried potatoes, and onions came together in a skillet to create something that felt like a complete meal. The preparation was straightforward but required timing. Potatoes were sliced thin and fried until golden, onions were cooked until sweet, and hot dogs were browned for flavor. Combined in one pan, these simple ingredients created a dish that satisfied both hunger and the desire for something that felt substantial. Potatoes were also widely utilized and reasonably priced. The potato holds its spot in the Great Depression Hall of Fame, right up there with chipped beef and pinto beans. This meal proved that with basic cooking skills and imagination, even the most limited ingredients could become something families actually looked forward to eating. 7. Lard sandwiches, when protein was precious. In an era when butter was expensive and meat was scarce, lard sandwiches represented the ultimate in making do with what was available. Lard sandwiches were common, a slice of bread spread with lard, open face if with beans, or a closed sandwich for a schoolchild's lunch. This wasn't just about calories, it was about providing growing children with the fat their bodies needed for development. Richard Willis, for example, tells of eating lard sandwiches while growing up on a farm in Depression-era. Lard provided concentrated energy that could sustain children through long school days or afternoon chores. The preparation was simple but required good lard, the kind rendered from bacon or other pork fat that added flavor beyond just grease. Spread on bread, often homemade, it created something that was surprisingly satisfying. Dessert would be an open-face lard sandwich sprinkled with a spoonful of sugar. For modern sensibilities, lard sandwiches might seem unappetizing, but for Depression-era children, they represented sustenance and care. Mothers who packed these lunches were ensuring their children had the energy they needed, using whatever resources were available. It was survival disguised as a simple sandwich. 8. Hoover Stew, the president's unintended legacy. Named after President Herbert Hoover, who was in office when the Depression began, Hoover Stew was one of the most popular soups during the Great Depression. It typically consisted of cooked macaroni, hot dogs, stewed tomatoes, and canned sweet corn or peas. This wasn't fine dining, it was survival cooking that happened to taste better than anyone expected. The combination of pasta for bulk, hot dogs for protein, and vegetables for nutrition created something that could feed a family for days when prepared in a large pot. The name carried a hint of bitter irony, as families associated their hardship with the president they felt had failed them. The beauty of Hoover Stew lay in its flexibility. When corn wasn't available, families used peas. When tomatoes were too expensive, they used whatever canned vegetables they could find. The hot dogs provided flavor that made the whole pot taste more substantial than its ingredients suggested. Simmered in a large pot and packed with flavor, the Hoover Stew was a hearty meal that could feed a family for days. For working-class families, this stew represented community in a pot. Neighbors often shared ingredients, and the resulting meal could bring families together around tables when there wasn't much else to celebrate. 9. Mock apple pie, crackers masquerading as fruit. Perhaps no Depression-era recipe demonstrates ingenuity better than mock apple pie, which achieved the impossible, creating apple pie without apples. Ritz crackers, when combined with lemon, cinnamon, and sugar, created the most perfect fake apple pie. The thrifty nature of Depression-era Americans led them to discover that Ritz crackers, when combined with lemon, cinnamon, and sugar, created the most perfect fake apple pie. The timing could not be better, as this mock apple pie recipe gained popularity when apples were costly and in short supply. The science behind this seemingly seeming impossibility lies in texture and flavor. When soaked in syrup flavored with lemon and cinnamon, Ritz crackers softened to approximate the texture of cooked apples. The salt in the crackers actually enhanced the sweetness, creating a more complex flavor than straight sugar could provide. For children who might not have tasted real apple pie in months, mock apple pie delivered the psychological satisfaction of dessert. The familiar spices, cinnamon especially, triggered memories and expectations of apple pie, while the sweetness satisfied cravings for treats that were increasingly rare in Depression-era households. 10. Tomato soup cake, Campbell's unexpected masterpiece. The tomato soup cake was quite possibly the most incredible invention of the Depression era, as few would associate a savory soup with a sweet treat. This wasn't desperation, this was culinary genius disguised as making do. The familiar Campbell's canned tomato soup contained gelatinized starch from thickeners and pectin from tomatoes, which were the prerequisites to a perfectly moist cake. The soup acted as both liquid and binding agent, creating cakes that stayed moist longer than traditional recipes. The preparation required faith. Mixing tomato soup into cake batter seemed wrong until the finished product emerged from the oven. The tomato flavor disappeared completely, leaving behind a spiced cake that tasted mysterious and satisfying. Cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves masked any remaining vegetable notes while enhancing the cake's complexity. After its heyday in the 1930s and 1940s, the recipe has continued to enjoy lasting popularity ever since. It was said that American writer Sylvia Plath baked the tomato soup cake on the same day she penned her poignant poem Death Company in 1962. This cake proved that innovation born from necessity could create something genuinely delicious. 11. Peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwiches, the protein power couple. As Garden Gun reports, the peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwich took hold of America in the 1930s. During the peak of the Depression, every household had the two staple items mayo and peanut butter, and the sour, nutty concoction was filled with enough protein and provided enough sustenance to keep families going. This combination might sound strange today, but it made perfect nutritional sense during the Depression. Peanut butter provided protein and healthy fats, while mayonnaise added additional calories and made the sandwich more filling. The tangy mayonnaise actually complemented the nutty sweetness of peanut butter better than many expected. For working-class families, both ingredients were shelf-stable and economical. A jar of peanut butter could last weeks, and mayonnaise was often homemade from eggs when they were available, or purchased as one of the new commercial products that were becoming affordable for average families. The preparation became an art form, spreading just enough mayonnaise to add moisture without overwhelming the peanut butter flavor. Children who grew up with these sandwiches often remember them fondly, not as desperate Depression food, but as satisfying lunch that kept them going through active afternoons. The combination provided sustained energy that plain bread simply couldn't match. 12. Chipped beef on toast, SOS for hungry families. Known affectionately, or not so affectionately, as SOS, either save our stomachs or something less printable, cream chipped beef was made with dried beef that was rehydrated in a ruse of butter, flour, and milk. Served on a piece of toast, cream chipped beef is also lovingly called shit on a shingle. This dish represented maximum protein extraction from minimal meat. Dried beef, when properly prepared, could stretch to feed multiple people while providing the satisfying taste of meat that working-class families desperately craved. The white sauce made from flour, milk, and whatever fat was available created richness that made the meal feel substantial. The preparation required technique. The dried beef needed to be rinsed to remove excess salt, then carefully rehydrated in the cream sauce. Too much salt would make the dish inedible, but properly balanced, it created something that genuinely satisfied hunger and provided comfort. It's still served at some breakfast places in the mid-Atlantic today. For families who might not taste meat for days at a time, chipped beef on toast represented luxury. The psychological satisfaction of meat combined with the filling nature of bread and cream sauce created a meal that felt complete and nourishing. 13. Bean sandwiches, protein between two slices. Bean sandwiches consisted of bread spread with cooked beans and a slice of tomato and lettuce, if available. This wasn't just making do. This was recognizing beans as the protein powerhouse they truly are. Beans provided essential amino acids that growing children needed, and when properly cooked and seasoned, they created sandwich fillings that were genuinely satisfying. Navy beans, pinto beans, or whatever variety families could afford were cooked until tender, often with onions or whatever seasonings were available. The preparation transformed yesterday's dinner into today's lunch. Leftover beans from dinner would be mashed slightly and spread on bread, creating something that felt substantial and provided lasting energy. When tomatoes were in season, a slice added freshness and acidity that balanced the earthiness of the beans. My aunt told me they would have baked bean sandwiches in their school lunch. For children carrying these lunches to school, bean sandwiches provided protein and fiber that kept them alert and energized through long school days. The combination proved that proper nutrition didn't require expensive ingredients, just creativity and understanding of what bodies needed. 14. Cornmeal mush, more than just breakfast. Cornmeal mush was served plain, fried, or with milk and syrup. This versatile dish could appear at breakfast, lunch, or dinner, depending on how it was prepared and what accompaniments the family could afford. For breakfast, hot cornmeal mush with milk and whatever sweetener was available provided carbohydrates and energy to start the day. Leftover mush would be poured into loaf pans, allowed to cool and set, then sliced and fried for later meals. The transformation from creamy breakfast to crispy fried slices showed remarkable ingenuity. Frequent times, in late evenings, Dad would coax my mum to cook a kettle of cornmeal and make mush. This she would pat down in a loaf pan and then slice it in the morning and fry each piece. We put sorghum syrup on the golden hunk of mush to make our early morning meal. The appeal lay in its versatility and staying power. Cornmeal was affordable, stored well, and could be prepared dozens of different ways. Fried mush with syrup felt like a proper breakfast, while plain mush could be stretched with milk to feed more people. This simple grain became a foundation that working-class families built entire meal plans around. 15. Twinkie-style depression cake, joy in a simple package. When Hostess introduced Twinkies in 1930, the cream-filled sponge cake cost 1 nickel and delighted young and old. But working-class families soon learned to make their own versions using whatever ingredients they had available. Depression cake recipes focused on creating sweetness and moisture without expensive ingredients like butter and eggs. An example was the milkless, eggless, butterless cake, with main ingredients consisting of brown sugar and flour. These cakes proved that joy didn't require luxury ingredients. The preparation required understanding how different ingredients worked together. Vinegar and baking soda created lift, while brown sugar provided both sweetness and moisture. The resulting cakes weren't as rich as butter cakes, but they satisfied the deep human need for sweetness and celebration. For children who might not taste store-bought cake for months, these homemade versions represented special occasions and proof that their families could still create treats. The simple pleasure of cake, any cake, reminded kids that even in hard times, there could still be reasons to celebrate small victories and moments of sweetness. 16. Hot water cornbread, crackling from nothing. When even basic baking ingredients were scarce, hot water cornbread proved that crispy, satisfying bread could be made from just cornmeal, water, and salt. This wasn't compromise. This was discovering that simplicity could create something genuinely delicious. The technique was crucial. Boiling water was mixed with cornmeal to create a thick batter that could be shaped into patties and fried until golden and crispy. The result was somewhere between cornbread and a corn pancake, with a satisfying crunch that made even the simplest meals feel more substantial. One elderly woman from rural Kentucky told me her mother would make water cornbread, just cornmeal, water, and salt. When times were especially lean, they'd fry it in whatever fat they had, even save bacon grease when they hadn't seen actual bacon in months. The appeal went beyond nutrition. The crackling sound of frying cornbread created anticipation, and the aroma filled kitchens with something that smelled like prosperity, even when prosperity was nowhere to be found. For families stretching every ingredient, hot water cornbread proved that good food didn't require complex recipes or expensive ingredients. 17. Sunday sugar cookies, weekly sweetness. Usually Clara said she and her family would eat bread and butter with coffee for breakfast every morning. But her mother used to make sugar cookies for breakfast on Sundays. The cookies were simply made with eggs, sugar, and flour. These weren't elaborate decorated cookies. They were simple drop cookies that used precious sugar and eggs to create something special for the most important day of the week. Sunday sugar cookies represented the rhythm of hope, a weekly reminder that even in hard times, some things remain sacred. These sugar cookies do not get rolled out. They get messy if you try. The simplicity was part of their charm, mixed quickly, dropped on pans, and baked until just set. They provided sweetness without requiring techniques or ingredients that working-class families couldn't manage. For children who ate these on Sunday mornings, the cookies became associated with rest, family time, and the promise that even hard weeks had endings. The combination of sugar, flour, and eggs created something that felt festive without being extravagant, proving that celebration could happen even when resources were extremely limited. 18. Freed potato peels, waste not, want not. When every part of every ingredient mattered, potato peels became crispy snacks that provided nutrients and satisfied the craving for something crunchy. Freed potato peel sandwiches with mayo, yum, showed how thoroughly families used every scrap of food. The preparation was simple but required good timing. Potato peels were washed thoroughly, then fried in whatever fat was available until crispy and golden. Salt, when available, made them taste almost like chips. The nutrients in potato skins, potassium, fiber, and vitamins made this practice nutritionally sound as well as economically necessary. These crispy peels could be eaten alone as snacks, used as sandwich fillings, or crumbled over other dishes to add texture and flavor. For children who rarely tasted anything resembling chips or crackers, fried potato peels provided the satisfaction of crunchy snacks while using ingredients that might otherwise have been discarded. The practice taught important lessons about resourcefulness and respect for food. Nothing was wasted because nothing could be wasted. Potato peels represented the philosophy that creativity and care could transform even scraps into something enjoyable and nourishing. 19. Vinegar pie, sweetness from soreness. Vinegar pie and its cousin, know-nothing pie, have been low-budget or out-of-everything treats since the late 1800s, and used by pioneer cooks to give some variety to the diet. This represented the ultimate triumph of ingenuity over limitation. The science behind vinegar pie might surprise modern cooks. When combined with sugar and thickened with flour or eggs, vinegar created a tart sweet filling that resembled lemon, without requiring expensive citrus. The acetic acid in vinegar provided the sharp note that made desserts interesting, while sugar balanced the sourness. The preparation required understanding how acid worked in baking. Too much vinegar would create an inedible pie, but the right amount provided complexity and interest that plain sugar pies couldn't match. The result was something that genuinely satisfied the desire for dessert without requiring ingredients that were beyond working-class budgets. For families who might not taste lemon pie for years, vinegar pie provided the psychological satisfaction of tart, sweet dessert. The familiar spices, often cinnamon or nutmeg, created comfort and familiarity, while the vinegar provided the brightness that made desserts feel special and celebratory. 20. Mayonnaise sandwiches, simple satisfaction. When meat was unaffordable and cheese was a luxury, mayonnaise sandwiches provided fat, flavor, and the satisfaction of something more substantial than plain bread. This wasn't poverty food. This was recognizing that sometimes simple combinations could be genuinely satisfying. Mayonnaise sandwiches were also common and honestly sound a lot better than the last option, plain onion sandwiches. The mayonnaise provided calories and fat that growing children needed, while the slight tanginess made plain bread taste more interesting. The preparation was an art form, spreading just enough mayonnaise to moisten the bread without making it soggy, sometimes adding a thin slice of onion or tomato when vegetables were available. The result was something that felt like a proper sandwich rather than just bread with spread. For working-class families, mayonnaise was often one of the few condiments they could afford regularly. It kept well, provided substantial calories, and could make even the stalest bread taste fresh and appealing. Children who grew up with mayonnaise sandwiches often remember them as comfort food rather than Depression-era desperation. 21. Buttermilk pancakes from scratch, weekend luxury. Buttermilk pancakes were also cheap, filling, and very popular. For working-class families, Sunday morning pancakes represented weekly luxury, using precious ingredients to create something that felt festive and abundant. Buttermilk was often more affordable than regular milk because it was a byproduct of butter making, and it created pancakes that were more tender and flavorful than those made with regular milk. The slight tanginess of buttermilk paired perfectly with whatever syrup families could afford, often homemade from sugar and water. The preparation became a family ritual. Children would help measure flour and crack eggs when eggs were available, while mothers heated griddles and carefully portioned batter to ensure everyone got equal shares. The sizzling sound and aroma of pancakes created anticipation that made even simple breakfasts feel special. In the 1930s, Bisquick pancake mix and waffle irons entered the cooking scene, which timed nicely with the post-Depression, early WII-induced increase of women in the workplace. For families making pancakes from scratch, the process represented both economy and care, proof that love could transform basic ingredients into memorable meals. 22. Bacon grease sandwiches, liquid gold on bread. Bacon grease rules on anything became the motto for families who saved every drop of fat from the rare occasions when bacon appeared on their tables. Bacon grease sandwiches represented the ultimate in waste-nothing cooking. The preparation was simple but required good bacon grease, the kind that solidified when cool but spread easily when warmed. On bread, it provided concentrated flavor and calories that could sustain children through active days. Sometimes a sprinkle of salt enhanced the bacon flavor. For families who might taste actual bacon only on special occasions, bacon grease provided the smoky, salty flavor that made ordinary bread taste special. The fat provided essential calories and satisfied cravings for rich foods that were increasingly rare in Depression-era diets. We always save our bacon grease. This practice represented both economy and flavor. Every drop of fat was precious, and bacon grease could transform the simplest ingredients into something that tasted substantial and satisfying. It was liquid gold that proved nothing edible should ever be wasted. 23. Gel-O with everything, gelatin gone wild. The 1930s saw an explosion of gel-O recipes that mixed sweet gelatin with ingredients that might surprise modern tastes. General Foods published a booklet entitled what you can do with Jell-O. The inexpensive product delighted Americans, who have at various times referred to it as shivering Liz, nervous pudding, and shimmy treat. Working-class families discovered that Jell-O could stretch expensive ingredients while adding color and interest to meals. A popular southern gelatin salad called Coca-Cola salad contained gelatin, sugar, water, lemon juice, Coca-Cola, and mixed, diced fruits. The combination might sound strange, but it created desserts that felt festive. The appeal lay in Jell-O's ability to make a little bit of fruit or vegetables seem like more. Suspended in colorful gelatin, a small amount of pears or carrots could create something that looked abundant and felt special. The wiggling texture delighted children who rarely experienced novelty foods. Furthermore, gelatin was considered a novelty ingredient and very cutting-edge for the 1930s, which explained the popularity of this dish. For families struggling with monotonous diets, these colorful gelatin creations provided visual appeal and variety that helped combat the psychological effects of food limitation. 24. Rice pudding from leftovers, sweet endings. When leftover rice threatened to become waste, rice pudding transformed it into dessert that felt like luxury. Rice in milk with some sugar became the foundation for countless variations that working-class families created based on whatever ingredients they had available. The preparation was forgiving. Leftover rice was simmered with milk until creamy, then sweetened with whatever was available. Sometimes a precious egg would be stirred in for richness, or a sprinkle of cinnamon would add warmth and complexity. The result was something that genuinely satisfied the desire for dessert. For families where dessert was often a luxury, rice pudding provided the psychological comfort of sweet endings to meals. The creamy texture and gentle sweetness created satisfaction that went beyond nutrition, proving that even simple ingredients could create moments of genuine pleasure. The beauty of rice pudding lay in its flexibility. It could be served warm as comfort food or chilled as a refreshing dessert. Leftover rice became something children actually looked forward to, transforming potential waste into anticipated treats that made even difficult days end on a sweet note. 25. Depression-era hot chocolate, warmth in a cup. Another favorite treat was an occasional cup of hot chocolate made from cocoa powder, sugar, canned milk, and hot water. This wasn't the rich hot chocolate we know today, but something that provided warmth, sweetness, and comfort when all three were desperately needed. The preparation required careful rationing. Cocoa powder was expensive, so each cup used just enough to provide chocolate flavor without depleting precious stores too quickly. Canned milk, when available, added richness, but often families made do with just cocoa, sugar, and hot water. For children who might not taste chocolate for weeks at a time, these cups of hot chocolate represented pure luxury. The warmth was as important as the flavor. Hot drinks provided physical comfort during cold months when heating fuel was carefully conserved. The ritual of making hot chocolate became as important as drinking it. Children would gather around the stove, watching steam rise from the pot, anticipating that first sip of sweetness and warmth. The cocoa's aroma filled kitchens with the promise of comfort, creating memories that lasted long after the depression ended. These weren't just drinks, they were liquid hugs that reminded children they were loved and cared for even when times were impossibly hard. The simple pleasure of cupping warm hands around a mug of sweet, chocolatey comfort provided moments of pure joy that helped families endure whatever hardships tomorrow might bring. The Great Depression taught an entire generation that love and ingenuity could transform the humblest ingredients into something meaningful. These 25 foods carried families through America's darkest economic hours, proving that creativity and determination can overcome almost anything. If these forgotten recipes brought back memories, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from America's past. Because sometimes, looking back helps us appreciate how far we've come.